Whenever I listen back to something that I do, it just makes me feel...
She stood under blinding stage lights at just 13 years old, gripping a microphone stand like it was the only solid thing in the world. Her voice, when it finally broke free, sounded like it belonged to someone 3 times her age, cracked, raw, and full of a pain nobody expected from a schoolgirl from a village most Americans had never heard of. In seconds, 4 famous judges went from skeptical to stunned. In days, she became one of the most talked-about teenagers on the planet. But behind the viral clip, the standing ovations, and the golden buzzer, there was a much quieter story unfolding. One about what it actually costs a child to carry the weight of overnight fame. This is the real story of Courtney Hadwin, told honestly, without the exaggeration and internet rumors that have followed her name for years. Courtney Hadwin was born on July 6, 2004, in Hartlepool, County Durham, in the north of England. She grew up in the small village of Heselden with her parents, Paul and Anne-Marie, and her younger siblings, Melissa and Paul. Heselden isn't the kind of place that produces global pop stars. It's quiet, close-knit, the sort of village where everybody's business becomes everybody's business, and where a kid singing too loudly in her bedroom is more likely to get a knock on the wall than a record deal. But Courtney was singing loudly from the very beginning. She attended Heselden Primary School before moving on to the academy at Shotton Hall in Peterlee, and outside of school hours she threw herself into every form of vocal training she could find: Shotton Hall Theatre School, Peanuts Masterclasses, the Kate Sir School of Music, and Julie Miles' Vocal Ovation. She wasn't chasing fame in those early years. She was chasing sound. She fell in love with the growl and grit of soul and rock legends: Tina Turner, Etta James, James Brown, Otis Redding, voices that didn't sound like they belonged to polished pop radio, but to smoky clubs and lived in pain. She taught herself to sing the way those artists sang, not by copying notes, but by copying feeling. By her early teens, she was already busking on the streets of London to help fund her own lessons, an unusually mature and self-driven habit for someone still years away from being able to vote. She would take trains down from the north of England, sit up on a corner with nothing but her voice and whatever spare change passers-by were willing to part with, and treat every stranger who stopped to listen as a small but meaningful audition. It wasn't glamorous. It was cold pavement, unpredictable crowds, and the discipline of showing up to sing for people who owed her nothing. Her family didn't have industry connections or spare thousands for management fees. What they had was belief in her, and a willingness to drive her to every rehearsal and audition that might get her one step closer. In January 2018, months before the world would come to know her name, she performed at a charity event in Southampton for You Support, a cause raising money for children with life-limiting conditions. It was the kind of unremarkable, unfilmed appearance that never makes it into viral star retrospectives, but it says something about who she was before the cameras arrived. A kid who sang because singing mattered to her, not because she was chasing an audience. In 2017, at age 12, Courtney auditioned for the very first season of The Voice Kids UK. Mentored by McFly's Danny Jones on Team will.i.am, she performed a cover of Creedence Clearwater Revival's Proud Mary that immediately set her apart from other contestants her age. Not because it was technically flawless, but because it didn't sound careful. It sounded like she meant it. She advanced all the way to the live finals, closing her run with a rendition of "And I Am Telling You I'm Not Going" from the musical Dreamgirls before being eliminated as a finalist on July 16, 2017. It wasn't a win, but it was proof to her, to her family, and to anyone paying attention that her voice could hold a stage built for adults. According to her grandfather, Tom Story, the family made a deliberate choice not to chase the British talent show circuit further. He told reporters that the UK doesn't get her, and that the family believed she would find a bigger, more receptive audience in America. It was a bold bet for a family with no industry safety net. A year later, it paid off in a way none of them could have predicted. In the summer of 2018, 13-year-old Courtney Hadwin flew to the United States to audition for the 13th season of America's Got Talent. She walked out under the audition lights and, without much introduction, launched into a cover of Otis Redding's Hard to Handle. What happened next has been watched. At the time of this writing, over 300 million times. She didn't just sing the song. She performed it with her whole body, stomping, twisting, throwing herself into the rhythm like something had been unlocked inside her. Simon Cowell, a judge not exactly known for effusive praise, sat forward in his chair. The crowd was on its feet before the song even ended. Clips of the audition spread across every corner of the internet within hours, and headlines around the world reached for the same comparison. A teenage Janis Joplin, a schoolgirl with the voice of a blues legend twice her age. The attention was staggering for anyone, let alone a 13-year-old who, weeks earlier, had been a normal student in County Durham worrying about homework and exams. She suddenly had millions of strangers analyzing her every facial expression in freeze frame, debating her authenticity, and treating a nervous kid's stage performance as a permanent referendum on her talent. Journalists reached for comparisons because there was almost nothing else to compare her to. A young British girl with a voice built for smoky blues bars, standing on the biggest stage in American reality television, singing like she'd lived several lifetimes already. It didn't fit the usual mold of a talent show breakout. Late-night hosts wanted interviews. Morning shows wanted appearances. Her name trended on platforms she likely wasn't even old enough to have an account on herself. For a family used to modest village life, the scale of it all arrived not gradually, but all at once, like a door blown open in a storm. Courtney's run on the show kept building. In the quarterfinals, she performed James Brown's "Papa's Got a Brand New Bag," and again earned standing ovation, advancing to the next round. In the semifinals, her cover of Steppenwolf's "Born to Be Wild" was so electric that Judge Howie Mandel hit his golden buzzer, sending her straight through to the finals without a public vote, one of the show's highest honors, and a moment that all but guaranteed she would finish among the season's top acts. For the finals, she chose Tina Turner's "River Deep Mountain High," opening slow and restrained before exploding into full force by the chorus. Every judge stood. Simon Cowell told her directly that she was more than a great singer, that she was a trendsetter. Tyra Banks, hosting the results show, told her she had made it, regardless of what happened next, simply by reaching the top 10. What happened next was that Courtney Hadwin finished in 6th place. Canadian-American magician Shin Lim was crowned the season's winner. She didn't take home the $1 million prize, and for a contestant who had gone into the finale as one of the bookmakers' favorites, that was, by any measure, a real disappointment, delivered live, on television, in front of an audience of millions, at 14 years old. This is where a lot of retellings of Courtney's story either stop, or worse, invent something dramatic to fill the silence. Car crashes, injuries, hospital stays that never happened. The truth doesn't need any of that embellishment, because the real difficulty in Courtney's story isn't a single dramatic night. It's something slower, quieter, and in many ways more relatable. What sudden, overwhelming fame does to a child's mind. In the years since AGT, Courtney has spoken candidly about the anxiety that came hand in hand with her success. The same stage presence that made her a viral sensation, the fearlessness, the total lack of self-consciousness in front of a crowd, existed alongside a private struggle with the pressure of being watched, judged, and picked apart by strangers on a scale no 13-year-old is prepared for. Going from a village where everyone already knew her to being recognized, analyzed, and commented on by millions of people who had only ever seen a 2-minute clip of her life was disorienting in a way that fame narratives rarely capture honestly. The applause was real. So was the exhaustion behind it. That is the quieter tragedy in Courtney Hadwin's story. Not a single tragic event, but the slow toll that overnight global attention takes on a child who is still, fundamentally, just a kid trying to figure out who she is. She has been opened that the spotlight, for all the joy it brought her creatively, also triggered real anxiety, a far more common and far more honest struggle than any invented headline could capture, and one that countless other young performers quietly go through without ever saying so publicly. Think about what that actually meant in practice. A girl who, a year earlier, worried about ordinary teenage things, friendships, schoolwork, fitting in, was now expected to have polished answers ready for television interviewers, to perform flawlessly under studio lights week after week, and to somehow stay emotionally steady while strangers online debated her worth in real time. There was no gradual transition into fame, No slow build where she could learn the rules as she went. It happened in the space of a single televised minute, and then she was simply expected to keep up. The same intensity that made her performances so magnetic, the total, unguarded emotional commitment she brought to every song, is often, ironically, the same trait that makes a young performer more vulnerable once the audience turns from admiring to critiquing. Feeling everything that deeply on stage doesn't switch off the moment the cameras stop rolling. In December 2018, Courtney signed a record deal with Simon Cowell's Psycho Entertainment and Arista Records, a serious vote of confidence from the same judge who had praised her as a trendsetter. That November, she performed 5 live shows in Las Vegas alongside AGT winner Shin Lim at the Paris Hotel and Casino, a rare opportunity for a 14-year-old to headline alongside a champion so soon after the show ended. In 2019, she returned to television for America's Got Talent, The Champions, where she performed her first original song, Pretty Little Thing, a meaningful shift from covering other artists' work to putting her own words and experiences into a song for the first time. Between 2019 and 2022, she continued releasing singles and covers, including versions of Proud Mary and Sucker, steadily building a body of work outside the talent show format that had made her famous. But behind the scenes, her path was far from a straight line upward. She eventually moved on from her original label arrangement to build a career as an independent artist, a common but difficult transition for young performers who sign major deals in their early teens and later find they want more creative control over their own music. In 2024, she was briefly managed by the agency MN2S, but left due to a lack of live performance opportunities, before beginning to work with manager Oliver Mojita at Total Artist Management. These are not dramatic headlines. They're the unglamorous, ordinary business realities of trying to sustain a music career after the cameras and the viral clip have moved on to the next act. Realities that rarely make it into Breathless, What Happened to Her videos, but that are far more true to what actually shapes an artist's life. Rather than disappearing, Courtney spent the years after HT doing the harder, less visible work of becoming an artist on her own terms rather than a viral moment frozen in 2018. She released original singles, including That Girl Don't Live Here, a song she has described as one that got me through some hard times, adding that it let her say everything she wanted to say without being judged for it. It's a telling comment from someone who spent her early teenage years being judged, in real time, by a global audience. In September 2025, Courtney released her debut album, Little Miss Jagged, a title that knowingly nods back to the little girl with the untamed, jagged voice who first stunned the world on a talent show stage, while marking her arrival as a grown artist defining her own sound on her own terms. The album became available through independent distribution, including vinyl and limited digipack editions, a reflection of an artist choosing to build something lasting and self-directed rather than chasing another viral moment. There's something quietly significant about that choice of title. Instead of running from the persona that made her famous as a child, she reclaimed it, folding the little girl from the audition tape into the identity of a grown woman who now writes her own lyrics, chooses her own collaborators, and decides for herself what kind of artist she wants to be. It's a different kind of resolution than the tidy, dramatic arcs that clickbait headlines tend to promise. There was no single moment where everything was suddenly fixed. Instead, there was years of steady, patient rebuilding, new management, new songs, new stages, each one a little more her own than the last. By late 2025, she announced a UK tour, with dates set for cities including Birmingham and London, supported by the band Muddy Brook. It's a modest-scale tour compared to the scale of her overnight fame back in 2018, but in some ways that's exactly the point. It represents a young woman choosing steady, sustainable growth over chasing the impossible high of a viral clip, building an audience one live room at a time, on the strength of songs she wrote herself, rather than one algorithm-fed video. It's worth being direct about something. In recent years, a wave of sensationalized online content has circulated claiming Courtney Hadwin suffered a tragic accident, a life-threatening injury, or some dramatic unseen hardship that changed everything. None of that reflects her actual, documented history. It appears to be part of a broader pattern of manufactured, Heartbreaking tragedy. Content built around former reality show contestants. Stories invented for clicks rather than drawn from anything that happened. Courtney Hadwin has not been involved in any bus crash, car accident, or hospitalization of the kind that circulates in some of these clips. She is, as of this telling, alive, working, touring, and actively releasing music. The real story doesn't need fabrication to be compelling. A 13-year-old girl from a village of a few hundred people stepped onto an American stage, sang with more raw feeling than performers twice her age, and became a global name within days. She then had to quietly, privately, figure out how to survive that fame as an actual human being, managing anxiety, navigating a shifting industry, changing management teams, moving from label backing to complete independence, all while still legally a child for much of it. That's not a footnote to her story. That is her story. Courtney Hadwin's real arc is less about a single tragic twist and more about endurance through an unglamorous, complicated kind of pressure. Viral fame gave her visibility most artists spend a lifetime chasing, but it also handed a young teenager a level of scrutiny few adults could handle gracefully, let alone a kid still learning who she was outside of a stage. The honest version of her story includes real struggle, genuine anxiety, career uncertainty, and the slow, patient work of rebuilding a sustainable path in an industry that moves on from its viral moment of the year the instant a new one appears. What makes her story worth telling isn't a manufactured tragedy. It's that she kept going anyway. She kept writing. She kept performing, first for millions online, and later for smaller, dedicated rooms of fans who came specifically to hear the artist she'd become, not just a clip that made her famous. Nearly a decade after that first,